Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This morning's learning is sponsored by Debbie Rogel and Jay Rogel in memory of Barbara Rogel, Debbie's mother and Jay's wife. Her yahrzeit today, the 24th of Mar Cheshvan. Certainly a very special person, the life of very special people in our group and community, and also sponsored by Norma Joseph and family to commemorate the yahrzeit of Louis Joseph, another special person in the history of our community, Eliezer ben Avraham, Zichrono Livracha. Okay, thank you very much to the Rogels. Thank you for including us, remembering your mother and wife. Okay, chapter 24, verse 62. Chapter 24, verse 62. So we began discussing this yesterday when Eliezer is bringing Rivka to Avram and Yitzchak's home. Yitzchak is coming from the place known as Be'er Lachai Ro'i, which we mentioned. It's very interesting because that place is really associated with Hagar. What's that all about? So Rashi says that Yitzchak actually was bringing Hagar to marry Avraham. Sforno says something else. If you look at the first Sforno on Pasuk Samech Beis, Ba mi Be'er Lachai Ro'i, Lispala b'makom shebo nishma tefila shivchaso. Okay, so he went to go there to daven, and to daven that he should get the right spouse. And he knew that that was a place that prayers were answered, because that's where Hagar's prayers were answered, that she and Yishmael were saved. V'kodem shispalel kvar nishlam minyano b'charon, v'karva ishto lava al derech ter mikro v'ani aneh. Then this Sforno quotes the famous pasuk that before they call, God already answers. So it's a fascinating thing. So he went to daven, but before he even davened it, the solution had already been brought, because again, they were just coming now, but by the time he had davened, Eliezer had already interacted with Rivka. So it's an interesting thing. This Sforno is discussed by some because Yitzchak grew up in the home of Avram and Sarah, and he has to find some spot that someone's prayers were once answered. You know, you would think that Avram, Sarah's tent were good places for prayer, but what it really seems to show you is obviously the way that Hagar was answered was an extraordinary way, but it seems to show you the power of prayer for everyone. You don't have to be the biggest tzaddik, the most pious person for your prayers to be answered. If we, like the pasuk in Ashrei, Karov Hashem l'chol karav, that God is close to all those who call out to him in truth. It doesn't say all those tzaddikim who call out to him in truth. It says all those people who call out to him in truth, and it seems to be the point. It's an interesting thing to think about. Okay, moving on to chapter 25. Chapter 25, verse 1. By Yosef Avraham, and Avraham continued, by Kach Isha Ushma Keturah, and he married a woman named Keturah. Let's see the Kli Yakar on Pasuk Aleph. Yosef Avraham, Vaikach Isha Shma Keturah. Chazar Menasa es Hagar, as we mentioned yesterday and referenced already this morning. He married Hagar, Vikara Keturah. She became known as Keturah. Al Shem Shema'aseha Noim Kiktoras. Keturah is related to the word Ketores. This is a Rashi. That the idea is that the same way that the incense, the Ketores, had a fragrant smell, so the actions of Hagar were fragrant. That is to assume that this is Hagar we're talking about is also implied in the pasuk, because the pasuk says Vayosef. Vayosef means to add, to continue. It's not a normal language used when marrying someone, but if you say this is someone that Avram had a relationship with years before, then the language does make sense to add to it. It's really needs to be explained. It's a nice pshat that she's called Keturah because of her reactions, but why? Says it's really difficult because there's a Rashi earlier in Sefer Bereshis that talks about the fact that once Hagar left Avram and Sarah's home, she went back to the idol worship of her father. So if she went back to the idol worship of her father, why do we refer to her as a person who has these wonderful actions? The says what I really think the pshat is, that he originally divorced her because that was Sarah's request. Ki Avram hayatafel l'Sarah b'nevuah, because Avram was secondary to Sarah when it came to prophecy. The Yada Sarah b'nevuah shesofa lachzor l'gilulei beisavia. That part of where Sarah is coming from is Sarah understood that Hagar ultimately would revert to idol worship. And that's part of where she was coming from, that we have to get rid of Hagar and her son. We discussed this pasuk. I think Rosh Hashanah time we discussed this pasuk, but it says that Sarah saw Yishmael, literally mitzachik means laughing, but one of the connotations of mitzachik is to be involved with idol worship. So whatever her prophecies are that Hagar would ultimately get back to idol worship are confirmed by the fact that Hagar's son is already involved in idol worship. Okay, Namra. Therefore, Sarah said to Abraham, she said, you've got to expel this maidservant and her son. Kimasa shneim shavim. Their actions are on the same page. Kilo yirash ben azos im b'ni im Yitzchak, that the son of this maidservant should not inherit with my son Yitzchak. Kilo yirash mimase Avraham. What does it mean he's not going to inherit? She's saying that he's not going to follow in your footsteps. She's not saying I don't want him to get any of the 401k. That's not what she's saying. What she's saying is he's not going to be like you. Vayera hadavar beinei Avraham. This was bad in the eyes of Avraham. Kilo yada b'ruach hakodesh amunas avodah zara asher belibam. He didn't have the same instincts that Sarah did for understanding what was going on with Hagar and Shmuel. He didn't realize they were so involved with the avodah zara. Therefore, it's told to Avraham, whatever Sarah says, listen to her. Mikan lamdu, and from that we learn Avraham tafel Sarah b'nevuah. The fact that God says no, Sarah's on the mark shows us that Sarah had a stronger prophecy than Avraham. Miyad vayishalcheha b'gerushin. So therefore, Avram divorces Hagar. Vatelech vatesa kasher amra Sarah. And indeed, as Sarah predicted, according to Kli Yakar's understanding of things, Hagar went along and did avodah zara. V'imkein me'achas shegirsha machmas ervas davar shel avodah zara kasha eichaz arv'lakcha. So now this is a very interesting setting the stage for this part of the story, but the question's only magnified. So if she went off and did avodah zara as Sarah predicted, why in the world would Avram marry her later? Therefore, the pasuk comes and clarifies that she improved herself. There's a famous idea, Rashi says it later in the parsha, that Yishmael repented. Hagar also repented. And in order to publicize this, Avram called her Keturah al Shem HaKtoras, connected to the incense. He piercing blakol sha'asa tshuva, because he publicized to everyone that she had done tshuva. V'chol bal tshuva nasim lo hasdonos keschuyos v'hasdonos olim l'reach b'choach kimo haschuyos. This is a famous idea that if a person sincerely repents, their sins turn into merits. So Hagar, with her sincere repentance, had plenty of merits. That's the idea. V'alkein, and therefore himshila l'ktores shachelbana shareicho ra ola l'reach l'choach k'chol sha'ar b'samim. And therefore, says the Kli Yakar, the image of ketores, it's more than just a random thing that smelled good. There's a famous thing that the frankincense in ketores on its own would not smell good, but frankincense in the broader mixture, total mixture, makes a nice smell. So Hagar had some complicated past, but the fact that she repented from that complicated past adds to the fragrant smell now. It's an interesting image to think about, the Torah specifically, about how about Shuva's past actions fit in the big picture. So the bottom line is, the Kli Yakar's pshat is that it was very significant that she was called Keturah, specifically because her past was sort of complicated. So Avram wanted it known that she really had changed as a person. Interesting pshat. Okay, verse 7. We're near the end of Avram's life now. These were the years of the life of Avram which he lived. 175 years. Isn't that he lived extraneous? These are the years of the life of Abraham that he lived. Well, right. That's what it means to be the years of the life. That's when he lived. That's just an interesting shot over here. I'm sure not everyone agrees with it, but it's an interesting Orach Chaim. Orach Chaim at Pasuk Zayin, Ve'el Yemei Shnei Asher Choi, Tiktek Lomar Chai. It specifically says that he lived, V'divrei Hamzal, based on the Midrashic quote, Sha'amru, Ki Chasru Lo Hei Shanim Kodem, Yom Shabo Asa Esav Hei Averos. It's this famous idea that Avram's life ended 5 years earlier than it would have, because God didn't want Avram to see Esav's decline in terms of his sinful behavior, so that he passed early. So that, says the Orach Chaim, is the Pshat and Pasuk. These are the years of the life of Avram that he lived. Perish lo shanim shekatzvu lo ki yoser hayu. Not the number of years that were designated for him, because actually the original plan had Avram living longer. But we're just going to say the years that he actually lived. Just an interesting Orach Chaim. Okay. Moving ahead to verse 17. Okay, so Avram has died, and now we're on the life of Yishmael. Ve'ele Shnei Chayei Yishmael. These now are the years of Yishmael. Ma'as shana, shloshim shana v'sheva shanim, 137 years. Vayigvav Yamas, and he expired. Vayosef el Amav, and he was gathered in to his people. Why does it tell us how old Yishmael was when he died? We're not that interested in Yishmael. We're certainly more interested in Yitzchak than we are in Yishmael. There's not a parallel pasuk by Esav, by the way. So why, yes, Yishmael and not Esav? In many ways, Yishmael and Esav are sort of similar stories in terms of our relationship with them. So interesting Rashi over here. Rashi on pasuk Zayin ve'ela shnei chayei Yishmael amar Reb Chia bar Abba lama nimru shnosav shel Yishmael k'dei liyaches bohen shnosav shel Yaakov. So he brings out a very interesting medrash that through understanding the age of Yishmael, when he died, we have a better handle on Yaakov. Mishnosav shel Yishmael lamadnu sheshimesh Yaakov b'veis Ever arba esrei shana k'shpirish me'aviv kodem shaba eitzel lavan. Yaakov's time in the yeshiva of Shem ve'Ever, it's a very famous thing discussed in the Medrash. It's not explicit in the Psukim, certainly, but this is time in the yeshiva of Shem ve'Ever, so a little bit of a mystery in terms of just trying to figure out the timeline. And actually, the Medrash says because of this pasuk, we can figure it all out. That he spent 14 years in the yeshiva of Shem ve'Ever after he left the home of Yitzchak, before he went to Lavan. Sherek shepiresh Yaakov me'aviv Meis Yishmael, because once Yaakov left his father, that's actually when Yishmael died, and there's a certain pasuk of juxtaposition, Vayelech Esav el Yishmael, that this pasuk Esav went to Yishmael. So we learn that Yaakov left when Yishmael died, but I don't know when Yishmael died. But from this pasuk, I do know when Yishmael died, and that helps me do the math. The Ramban says the reason why Yishmael's life duration is mentioned is it's a general statement about Zerat Tzadikim Yivorach. It's a general statement about the merits of the children of the righteous, that that you see that Avraham bore a real family. The reason he says there's no such pasuk by Esav is because once Yaakov dies, Yaakov predeceased Esav. Once Yaakov dies, like as far as we're concerned, the story is over. The story of the patriarchs is over, and so therefore to focus afterwards on how long Esav lived wasn't of interest. That's how the Ramban explains it. Two very different ideas. We discussed the Sforno about the place of Yitzchak's tefillah. We discussed the Kliyakar about Hagar being referred to as Keturah. We discussed the Orach Chaim regarding why it has to say these are the years of the life of Avram which he lived, and we discussed Rashi and the Ramban regarding the discussion of the duration of Yishmael's life.